The last deployment. The dropship shuddered through Curis 9's atmosphere like a bullet through flesh. Captain Theron Vance gripped the overhead rail, his scarred knuckles white against the metal. Around him, the galaxy's finest killers sat in practiced silence, warriors whose names were whispered in fear across a dozen systems. 30 seconds to hot zone, Lieutenant Sarah Calloway's voice cut through the cabin, crisp and professional. Theron's eyes found her across the dim interior, catching that brief moment when her gaze met his. 3 years of missions together, 3 years of dancing around something neither could name. On the battlefield, they moved like extensions of each other. Off it, they maintained the careful distance that regulations demanded. "Sir, energy readings are spiking," Sarah continued, her fingers dancing across her tactical display. "Command said this was a simple extraction of Ambassador Kane from the diplomatic compound." "Command says a lot of things," Thorin replied, checking his rifle's charge for the third time. "How bad are we talking?" Sarah's expression tightened. "The signatures don't match any known weapons or power sources. The entire sector is. I don't know how to describe it. It's like the ground itself is generating electromagnetic pulses." Corporal Marcus Reaper Dane laughed from his seat, his massive frame making the crash harness look like a child's toy. "That's why they sent us, Lieutenant. When the impossible shows up, they don't send soldiers. They send legends." The words hung in the air with the weight of truth. Theron's team had turned the tide at the siege of Corinth Station. They'd extracted the High Council from the burning towers of Meridian Prime while an entire enemy fleet rained hell from orbit. Children played games about their exploits. Historians documented their tactics. But Theron felt the cold finger of intuition trailing down his spine, the same instinct that had kept him alive through 20 years of war. "Lock and load," he ordered, his voice carrying the authority that had made him the youngest captain in the Terran Defense Force. "Whatever's down there, we go in hard, grab the ambassador, and get out. No heroics, no glory runs. We're ghosts." The dropship's engines screamed as they entered their final descent. Through the viewport, Curis 9's surface revealed itself, a nightmare landscape of shattered cities and crystalline formations that seemed to pulse with their own malevolent light. The battlefield stretched below them like a wound in the planet's flesh, still raw after 3 years of grinding warfare. "Something's wrong," Sarah whispered, her analytical mind processing data faster than the ship's computers. "The energy signature, it's not coming from a source point. It's everywhere. The entire battlefield is active." Theron moved to her station, close enough to smell the faint scent of her shampoo beneath the cabin's recycled air. "Can we abort?" "Negative. The ambassador's beacon just activated. If he's still alive, we have maybe 30 minutes before." The ship lurched violently, throwing Theron against the bulkhead. Alarms screamed. Through the chaos, he heard Sarah shouting coordinates, saw her hands steady on the controls even as the world spun. They hit the surface hard. Into the maw. Theron's head rang like a bell as he dragged himself from the wreckage. The dropship had carved a burning trench across the crystalline plain, its hull split open like a gutted animal. Emergency lights flickered in the smoke, casting dancing shadows across twisted metal. "Sound off," he barked, tasting blood. "Reaper, functional," came the response, followed by 3 more voices. Then silence. "Sarah?" Theron's chest tightened. He stumbled through the debris, shoving aside equipment and broken panels. "Lieutenant Calloway, respond." "Here," her voice emerged from beneath a collapsed bulkhead. Theron and Reaper hauled the metal aside, revealing Sarah pinned but conscious, blood trickling from a gash above her eye. Their hands met as he pulled her free, and for one unguarded moment, her fingers squeezed his with desperate relief. "Ambassador's beacon is 2 clicks northeast," she said, all business despite the pain etched across her face. "But the readings are getting worse. That energy signature, it's like the planet is breathing." She wasn't wrong. The ground beneath them pulsed with a rhythm that felt organic, alive. The crystalline formations that jutted from the earth glowed with bioluminescent patterns, growing brighter with each pulse. "We move in 2 teams, Theron ordered. Reaper, take Corporal Hayes and Private Jen, establish a perimeter and look for survivors from the diplomatic detail. Sarah, you're with me. We find Kane." Reaper's expression showed he understood what Theron wasn't saying: keep our best tactical mind close, keep her safe. The big man nodded and moved out with his team, disappearing into the crystalline forest. Theron and Sarah pushed northeast, weapons raised, moving through terrain that defied reason. The ground wasn't just pulsing now, it was shifting, reforming. Paths they'd walked minutes ago had sealed themselves behind them with new growth. "This isn't a battlefield," Sarah said, her voice tight. "This is something else. Something that wants us here." The ground answered her observation by opening up beneath their feet. They fell through darkness that screamed, tumbling through what felt like the throat of some vast organism. Theron managed to grab Sarah's hand as they plummeted, pulling her close as they hit water, or something like it, in an underground cavern that glowed with the same eerie bioluminescence. They surfaced together, gasping, and Theron pulled her toward a shelf of smooth stone. The chamber around them was massive, its walls covered in symbols that seemed to writhe in the dim light. Ancient. Alien. Hungry. "Are you hurt?" Theron asked, his hands running over her shoulders, her arms, checking for injuries with professional efficiency that barely masked his concern. "I'm fine," she said, but her voice shook. "Theron, our team. We'll find them. First, we need to find a way out." But even as he said it, he watched the hole they'd fallen through seal itself with new growth, cutting off their escape. They were alone in the silence that followed, dripping and exhausted, the weight of their situation settling over them like a shroud. Sarah shivered, and Theron moved closer, body heat the only comfort he could offer. 3 years, she said quietly, not looking at him. 3 years I've wanted to tell you. Don't. His voice was rough. Don't say it, Sarah. Not like this. Not when we might. Especially now. She turned to face him, her eyes fierce in the dim light. Especially because we might not get another chance. The kiss was inevitable, years of tension and denial collapsing in an instant. Her hands fisted in his tactical vest, pulling him closer. His fingers tangled in her wet hair, gentle despite the desperation. They broke apart only when breathing became necessary, foreheads pressed together. "I've dreamed about you," she whispered against his mouth. "Every night on every mission, wondering if you felt it too." "Every damn day," he admitted, his hands sliding down her back. "You're the reason I stay sharp, stay alive. Can't die when someone's counting on me to." She kissed him again, harder this time, and he responded with equal hunger. They found an alcove in the ancient chamber, hidden behind a pillar of the same smooth stone. What happened there was born of fear and need, of years of wanting and the terrible possibility of never having another chance. Her tactical suit came away in pieces, his following. In the alien darkness, they mapped each other with desperate reverence, the scars he'd earned at Corinth, the burn on her shoulder from Meridian Prime. Every mark a story, every touch a promise. "If we die down here," she began. "We won't," he said fiercely, moving above her, their bodies joining with an intensity that stole breath and reason. "I won't let this place take you. I swear it." They moved together in the bioluminescent glow, finding sanctuary in each other while the living battlefield pulsed around them, patient and eternal. For those stolen moments, they weren't legends or soldiers. They were simply Theron and Sarah, finally admitting what had always been true. Afterward, they lay tangled together on their scattered clothes, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her bare shoulder. "We should move," she said without conviction. "Soon," he promised, kissing her hair. "Just, let me hold you a little longer." The chamber pulsed around them like a heartbeat, and somewhere in the darkness, something ancient stirred, aware of the legends it had claimed. The Devourer's realm. The sound of footsteps on stone jerked Theron awake. He had his sidearm drawn in an instant, Sarah rolling away and grabbing her own weapon with the fluid grace of trained reflex. They dressed in seconds, every sense on alert. Movement, northwest corridor, Sarah whispered, her tactical mind already processing angles and cover positions despite everything that had just passed between them. But the figure that emerged from the shadows wasn't human. She was tall, with skin that held an iridescent quality, shifting between deep violet and midnight blue in the bioluminescent light. Her angular features were striking, beautiful in an otherworldly way, with eyes that glowed faintly amber. She wore the tattered remains of armor that had once been magnificent, and she moved with the cautious grace of a predator who'd learned to fear the dark. "Don't shoot," she said in heavily accented but comprehensible standard. "Unless you want to alert the devourer to your exact position." Theron kept his weapon trained on her. "Who are you?" "Commander Zyphira of the Kestran Imperial Guard." She raised her hands slowly, showing she was unarmed. "Or I was, before this place swallowed my entire battalion 6 months ago. Now I'm just another legend waiting to be digested." Sarah's analytical mind was already working. "The Kestran Empire has been searching for their lost expedition." "You're telling me they're all dead?" "Consumed," Zyphira corrected, her voice hollow. "The battlefield eats warriors. Not just their bodies, their experience, their tactical knowledge, their very essence. Every legend from 100 worlds who came here seeking glory or answers, they fed the machine." "What machine?" Theron demanded. Zyphira gestured to the walls around them. "This. All of this. It's not a planet. It's a weapon, created by the architects, a species so ancient they make humanity look like infants. They built the Devourer to end the great war of their era by consuming the finest warriors from all sides. And when their war ended, the weapon remained. Hungry. Patient." The word sent ice through Theron's veins. "Our team. The others. If they fell through like you did, they might still be alive. The Devourer processes slowly, savoring. It learns from each warrior it takes." Zyphira's expression softened with something like pity. "I've heard the screams echo through these chambers for months. Your people put up a good fight, I'm sure." "They all do." Sarah moved closer to Theron, and he felt her hand brush his, a gesture of solidarity and something more. "You've survived 6 months. There has to be a way out." "Survival isn't escape," Zyphira said bitterly. "I've mapped 300 kilometers of tunnels, found the remains of warriors from species I've never seen. Some of the bodies are thousands of years old, preserved in the Devourer's digestive system like trophies." A sound echoed through the chamber, something between a howl and a mechanical shriek. Zyphira's eyes widened. "Move. Now. When it hunts, it reshapes the tunnels, trapping prey in dead ends." They ran, following the Kestran warrior through passages that seemed to shift and flow around them. Theron kept Sarah close, one hand on her elbow, unable to shake the protective instinct that had intensified after their intimacy. She gave him a quick glance that said she understood, that she felt the same fierce need to keep him safe. They emerged into a larger chamber where the horror of Zyphira's words became visceral reality. The walls were lined with alcoves, each containing the remains of warriors from across the galaxy. Humans in TDF armor. Kestran soldiers like Zyphira. Species Theron didn't recognize, some humanoid, others decidedly not. All of them legends in their own right, now nothing but fuel for an ancient machine. "My friends are in here," Zyphira whispered, approaching one alcove where a Kestran warrior sat frozen mid-scream. "Lieutenant Kairos. He killed a war beast with his bare hands on Tremor 4. Songs were sung about his courage." Her hand touched the alcove's surface. "The Devourer took 3 weeks to finish processing him. I heard him calling for help every day." Sarah's face had gone pale. "This is what happens to us. To everyone who falls here." Unless we find a way to break the cycle, Theron said, his mind already working on tactical problems. Sci-Fi, you said you've mapped the tunnels. Is there a central control point? A core? There's something, the Kestran admitted. Deep below, where the energy signatures are strongest. But the path is guarded by constructs. The Devourer's immune system, I suppose. Warriors, it's fully digested and repurposed as defenders. Her amber eyes met his. I've tried to reach it alone 4 times. I barely escaped with my life each time. Then we don't go alone, Sarah said firmly. She activated her wrist computer, the one piece of tech that had survived the crash. If we can find the others from our team, combine our tactical expertise. The ground beneath them pulsed violently, and new alcoves began forming in the walls, hungry and waiting. It knows we're planning something, Sci-Fi said. The Devourer is intelligent. It learns. And it's learning that you 3 might be its most valuable meal yet. Theron looked at Sarah, then at Sci-Fi. 2 warriors from different worlds, both brilliant in their own ways. Both trapped in a nightmare that had already consumed the best fighters the galaxy had to offer. Then we give it indigestion, he said. We find my team, we pool everything we know, and we tear this thing apart from the inside. Sci-Fi studied him for a long moment, then a fierce smile crossed her features, the first expression of hope he'd seen from her. You're either the bravest human I've ever met or the most foolish. I've been called both, Theron admitted. Usually right before doing something impossible. That's what I love about him, Sarah said quietly, then seemed surprised she'd spoken the words aloud. The chamber pulsed again, and somewhere in the darkness, the Devourer's hunting cry echoed, closer now, more insistent. Come on, Sci-Fi said, leading them toward a new tunnel. If your team survived the fall, they'll be drawn toward the energy signatures like I was. We need to reach them before the Devourer does. They moved into the darkness together, 3 warriors from different worlds united by desperation and the slim hope that legends might write their own ending after all. Unlikely alliance. They found Reaper in a chamber that looked like a cathedral built by nightmares. The massive soldier was back-to-back with Corporal Hayes, fighting off what had once been warriors, now twisted constructs of flesh and crystal, the Devourer's antibodies given terrible form. The things moved with horrifying coordination, using tactics from 1,000 consumed minds. Suppressing fire. Theron shouted, and he and Sarah opened up with precision bursts that shattered 3 constructs. Sci-Fi moved with liquid grace, her salvaged blade finding weak points with the expertise of her people's ancient combat forms. The constructs retreated into the walls like water flowing uphill, absorbed back into the living structure. Reaper lowered his weapon, his face showing the strain of constant combat. Captain, he gasped. Thank God. Hayes is injured, and Jeanne, his voice broke. The walls took her an hour ago. We heard her screaming until. I know, Theron said, gripping his shoulder. But we're going to make sure she didn't die for nothing. Over the next hours, though time felt meaningless in the Devourer's depths, Sci-Fi led them through the shifting passages, avoiding the worst of the hunting patterns she'd learned. They found 2 more survivors from the diplomatic detail, including Ambassador Kane himself, half mad from days of isolation but alive. In a chamber that Sci-Fi had fortified as a safe point, they gathered to share knowledge. The Kestran warrior had scavenged supplies from the fallen, creating a grim sanctuary surrounded by warnings only she could read. The core is real, Sci-Fi explained, drawing diagrams in the dust with her finger. But it's protected by every tactical innovation the Devourer has consumed. Imagine fighting an enemy that knows every battle strategy from 10,000 years of galactic warfare. Then we can't beat it with strategy alone, Sarah said, her mind working through the variables. She sat close to Theron, their shoulders touching, a small comfort in the darkness. We need to do something it hasn't seen before. Like what? Hayes asked, nursing his injured leg. We're legends, sure, but this thing has eaten legends for breakfast since before humanity left Earth. Theron watched Sarah and Zyphira analyzing the problem together, two brilliant tactical minds from different worlds finding common ground. Something crystallized in his thoughts. "That's it," he said slowly. "We're legends. Individual glory, personal achievement. That's what the Devourer understands, warriors fighting for their own fame." Zyphira's amber eyes widened. "But if we fight as one organism, subordinating individual glory to collective survival? It won't know how to process that," Sarah finished, excitement entering her voice. "The Devourer consumes individual warriors. It's never faced a truly unified force where ego doesn't exist." That night, as they prepared for what might be their final mission, the dynamics between the three leaders shifted into something unexpected. Theron found Zyphira sitting alone, staring at the remains of her comrades in nearby alcoves. "Among my people," she said quietly, "there is a concept called Shyr, the bonding of warriors who faced death together. It transcends species, gender, individual desire. It's about recognizing strength and choosing to interweave your fate with another's." "We have something similar," Theron replied, settling beside her. "Though humans tend to make it more complicated than it needs to be. I've watched you with your Sarah," Zyphira continued. "The way you move around each other, the way your eyes find her in every room. It's beautiful. And rare, even among my people, to find that connection in the midst of war." Sarah approached from the shadows, having heard. "In the old chamber," she said softly, "when we thought we might die, we stopped pretending we didn't feel it." Zyphira's expression held understanding and something deeper, loneliness that had festered through months of isolation. "6 months I've been alone here. 6 months of survival without connection, without touch, without." She didn't finish, but she didn't need to. Sarah moved closer, and there was a moment of silent communication, a recognition that survival had many forms, and that comfort could be found in unexpected places. What developed between the three of them that night was born of necessity and genuine connection. Zyphira's culture understood bonds that transcended human conventions, and in the darkness of the Devourer's belly, traditional boundaries seemed irrelevant compared to the simple human, and alien, need for warmth, for touch, for the affirmation that they were still alive. Theron watched Sarah's hand find Zyphira's, saw the Kestran warrior's surprise soften into something like gratitude. When Sarah looked to him for permission, reassurance, he gave it without hesitation. This wasn't about possession or jealousy. This was about three warriors finding strength in each other before facing the impossible. They came together in the dim light, a tangle of different skin tones and textures, finding solace in intimacy that transcended species. Zyphira's touch was reverent, grateful, as Sarah showed her that she wasn't alone anymore. Theron held them both, protector and partner, understanding that what they shared wasn't diluting what he and Sarah had found, it was expanding it into something that could sustain them all. "Shyr," Zyphira whispered against Sarah's shoulder, tears tracking down her iridescent cheeks. "Thank you for reminding me what it means to be more than just a survivor." Afterward, they lay together in a configuration that would have seemed strange in any other context but here felt perfectly natural, Sarah between them, connected to both, all three drawing strength from the contact. "Tomorrow we fight as one," Theron said quietly. "No individual glory. No legends. Just us." "Just us," Sarah echoed, her fingers intertwined with both of theirs. "Together," Zyphira finished, and for the first time in months, she smiled without bitterness. The Devourer pulsed around them, unaware that its prey had transformed into something it had never encountered before, not warriors bound by individual glory, but souls bound by something far more powerful. Legends reborn. The descent to the core took 6 hours of coordinated movement that would have made military historians weep. Theron, Sarah, and Zyphira had crafted a tactical approach that deliberately violated every principle of individual heroics. When constructs attacked, they responded not with flashy maneuvers but with cold efficiency, covering each other's blind spots, rotating positions without ego, functioning as a single organism. The Devourer's passages began to shudder with what might have been confusion. Its defenses, built from the consumed knowledge of countless glory-seeking warriors, couldn't adapt to an enemy that had no individual weak points to exploit. "It's working," Hayes said, amazed, as another wave of constructs retreated in disorder. "The thing doesn't know how to fight us." "Because we're not fighting like legends," Sarah explained, her voice calm despite the chaos. "We're fighting like something it's never tasted, a collective with a shared will." The core chamber was vast, a cathedral of pulsing biomechanical horror. At its center hung a structure that looked like a cross between a brain and a reactor, veined with energy conduits that stretched into the walls like neural pathways. This was the heart of the Devourer, the processing center where it digested the essence of warriors and added their knowledge to its own. Alcoves lined the chamber walls, hundreds of them, thousands perhaps, each containing a warrior in various stages of being consumed. Theron saw TDF soldiers he'd known, their faces frozen in silent screams. Zyphira's entire battalion was here, their bodies slowly dissolving into the machinery. There, Zyphira pointed to a nexus point where the energy conduits converged. "That's the central processing node. Destroy that, and the Devourer loses its ability to integrate consumed knowledge. It becomes just a structure, not a thinking weapon." "It won't let us get close," Ambassador Kane warned. The diplomat had proven surprisingly competent under fire, coordinating the support team with unexpected skill. "Look at the defenses." The space between them and the Nexus was filled with constructs, not just the mindless antibodies they'd fought before, but fully realized warriors. Theron recognized fighting styles from across the galaxy, the flowing brutality of Kestran bladework, the precision shooting of TDF marksmen, the intimidating mass of Gorath heavy troopers. The Devourer had saved its best digested meals for this moment. "We'll never make it through that," Reaper said flatly. "That's the combined tactical knowledge of centuries." "Then we don't try to outfight them," Theron said, the final piece of the puzzle clicking into place. "We give the Devourer exactly what it wants." He turned to face his team, these warriors he'd come to love in different ways. "It consumes legends, processes their individual excellence. So we feed it something it can't digest, a legend that only exists as a collective." Sarah's eyes widened with understanding. "A tactical sacrifice. We let it take us, but not as individuals. As a single, interconnected consciousness." "That's insane," Hayes protested. "It's brilliant," Zyphira countered, her tactical mind racing ahead. "If we link ourselves together, truly merge our thoughts and strategies into a unified whole before the consumption process begins, the Devourer will try to process us as it does individual warriors. But we won't be individuals anymore. We'll be a paradox it can't resolve. It'll tear the system apart from inside," Sarah finished. "Like feeding a computer a logical impossibility." Theron nodded grimly. "But it means we all go in. No one stays behind. And there's no guarantee we come out the other side, intact." The team looked at each other. These legends, these warriors whose names were spoken in awe across the galaxy, faced the choice that defined them. Hayes spoke first. "Better to die as one unit than live as scattered cowards." "I'm in." "As am I," Zyphira said, her hand finding Sarah's. "Kaisitra." Our fates intertwined. One by one, the survivors committed. Ambassador Kane. Reaper. The two diplomatic guards. They formed a circle, and Sarah activated the neural link technology from her salvaged gear, meant for battlefield coordination but never used at this intensity. "Link up," she instructed. "Open your minds. No barriers, no secrets. Let everything flow together." The sensation was overwhelming. Theron felt Sarah's analytical brilliance flooding through him, Zyphira's centuries of cultural tactical knowledge, Reaper's raw combat instinct. He shared his leadership, his years of impossible decisions, his love for the woman beside him and the bond they'd formed with the alien warrior. They all poured into each other, individual identities blurring at the edges. "Now," Theron said with 7 voices simultaneously. "We advance as one. They walked into the waiting constructs not as a formation but as a single organism with multiple bodies. When one body was struck, 7 minds felt it and compensated. When one needed to reload, 6 others covered the gap without conscious thought. They moved with impossible coordination, each warrior an extension of a unified will. The constructs couldn't adapt. Their consumed tactical knowledge assumed individual targets with individual motivations. Faced with a collective consciousness, they faltered, hesitated, failed. The team reached the nexus point, and the Devourer's true defense activated. The alcoves around them glowed, and tendrils of energy lanced out, wrapping around each warrior, beginning the consumption process. Theron felt the pull, the terrible hunger of the ancient machine trying to peel away his individual essence. But he wasn't individual anymore. None of them were. They held together, their merged consciousness presenting the Devourer with an impossible meal, 7 bodies, 1 soul. The Devourer's processing center screamed, a sound that existed on frequencies beyond hearing. It couldn't separate the individual components. It couldn't digest the collective. The paradox burned through its neural pathways like acid, corrupting the stored knowledge of millennia. Now, Sarah's fragment of their consciousness commanded. All power to weapons. 7 bodies moved as one, targeting the nexus point with everything they had. The combined firepower of legends from 2 species, focused with perfect coordination, punched through the Devourer's defenses. The core exploded. Reality shattered, reformed, shattered again. Theron felt himself being torn apart and reassembled, felt the others screaming in his mind as the neural link overloaded. The Devourer convulsed around them, its chambers collapsing, its ancient machinery grinding itself to pieces. When consciousness returned, Theron was lying on crystalline ground under an open sky. Curi's 9's twin suns hung above, their light harsh after so long in darkness. Around him, the others stirred, separate now, individuals again, but forever changed by the merging. Sarah reached him first, her hands on his face, checking for injuries. "We made it," she said wondrously. "Theron, we actually." Zyphira's laugh interrupted her, wild and free. The Kestran warrior stood on shaking legs, staring at the ruins of the battlefield that had been her prison. "It's dead," she said. "The Devourer is dead. We killed a weapon that survived 10,000 years." Rescue ships were already descending, TDF cruisers and, surprisingly, Kestran Imperial vessels working in coordination. The destruction of the Devourer had sent energy signatures across the sector, visible for light years. In the aftermath, as medics worked and officials demanded explanations, Theron found himself standing between Sarah and Zyphira, looking at what remained of the ancient weapon. Bodies were being recovered from the ruins, warriors from 100 worlds, finally freed from their eternal imprisonment. "What do we tell them?" Reaper asked, gesturing to the approaching officials. "About what we did. About how we won. The truth," Theron said simply. "That legends alone couldn't win. That we only survived by becoming something more, something the Devourer had never encountered." "And what are we now?" Sarah asked quietly, her hand finding his. Zyphira's hand joined theirs, creating a link that felt natural despite the strangeness. "Survivors," she said. "Bonded by KSHYR. Warriors who learned that connection conquers glory." The officials would debrief them for weeks. Historians would study what happened here for generations. The tactical manuals would be rewritten based on their collective strategy. But in that moment, standing in the ruins of the battlefield that had swallowed legends whole, 3 warriors from different worlds understood a simple truth. They had entered as legends, individual, proud, seeking glory or duty or survival. They emerged as something far more dangerous, a proof that the bonds between souls could destroy weapons that individual heroism could never touch. Above them, the rescue ships descended, and below them, the Devourer's corpse settled into silence. The battlefield had finally been defeated, not by the legends sent to conquer it, but by the connections those legends forged in its darkest depths. And in the years to come, when new recruits asked about the Battle of Corice 9, they would hear a story not of individual heroics, but of three warriors who chose love over glory, unity over fame, and proved that sometimes the greatest legends are the ones written together. The end.